Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon session on Gunner Shot. We're going to discuss Chinese discourses on India. Why this topic? Let me put it in picture first, because that understanding that is important. There's a popular perception which says that China does not discuss India at all, and we're not discussed prominently in any newspaper except in South China Morning Post or occasionally in Global Times and all. And there's also this perception that most of the discussion in China is all about USA. And yet, to a large extent, it is true. Large extent, it is true. If you take any media, portal, you will find a whole lot of discussion on USA. More than 50%. They're always competing with USA. They're making it obvious that look, we are in competition with USA and no one else. And when you see it in that light, discussing about India is completely anathema. If they discuss about India, then it is acknowledging that India is its competitor, which they don't want to do. But at the same time, if we think they don't discuss India, they don't track India, as some comments suggest, as some Chinese guys who come and comment on Gunner Shot suggest, then we'll be living in a fool's paradise. And that's what I'm going to show. This presentation is going to be in two parts. The first, we'll talk about the fact that look, the Chinese media discusses a lot about India. And the second part of the story, I'm going to then focus on what is its perception of India and how they look at it and how we have to respond to them. Look at this. This is 3 excerpts from South China Morning Post. Past 1 week or so. They're talking of India's relationship with Pakistan. Full discussion. Mahakumbh. Right? And how the India-China border issue will affect bilateral relations and things like that. Just 3 past 1 week which have come up. Okay. I mean, just think they're discussing Kumbh Mela. Okay. And it's not only that, if you go and look into it, these are the kind of articles which come there. Let's have a look. I'll just read through the articles which are featured on India. Okay. What are these? These are all US ambitions, US sanctions on Russian oil and how it affects India, Kumbh Mela, our growing rift with Bangladesh and how it addresses Pakistan. Again, Kumbh Mela. Kumbh Mela has come up 2-3 times. Okay. Sanctions have come up 2-3 times. India and Europe, they're all discussing this, how China is increasing its deployment in Himalayas, Jimmy Carter's legacy, and so on and so forth. And you have a look at all these articles. They're covering a whole range of issues about India. And to think that they don't cover anything about India is a misnomer. And then that's in South China Morning Post. Now let me take you to a vernacular. This is Guancha, which I said always is a hardcore nationalistic Chinese tabloid. When they discuss America, they downplay it. When they discuss India, they show it as if India is from the prehistoric times. Okay? Now this article on the left by someone called Liu Xiuping. He says, in terms of cognitive space of India, many of us are one-sided or even incomplete. A very interesting article. And I'll discuss this in the next episode in detail. Okay? And then, this is just today, these 2 articles. It's analysis as to how Lenovo is increasing its capacities in India. Because it's a Chinese thing. And they discuss what's the modalities and all that. Just today. So, and the left article is a detailed analysis as to why India should, or rather, why China should pay more focus on India. I'll talk of this towards the end again. And when you go, there's some in this Guancha that I've given the link also. There's a South Asian research newsletter, part of Guancha. And the one on the right I've shown is in Chinese, on the left is, of course, uh, English, all the articles, you have a look, a lot of China, India related articles. You'll be surprised as to how they look at this article. He's talking of a pro Chinese scholar who writes about India and of how he's given measures to improve India China relations, including resuming direct flight, relaxing visas, revoking restriction journalists, yeah, all that. And who's this gentleman? Mr. Sudhindra Kulkarni, who was once part of the BJP. So they're talking about all this. You see another how Modi government and gangsters secretly planned transnational political murders. This is all about that, you know, uh, those killings which have taken place in Canada and what accusations of US against us. All these articles come feature in their Chinese language. All these are translations. Okay, and then there's a Indian scholar who again who's been quoted to say how India can't get out of the manufacturing cycle and or rely just on service industry, and how India lags in manufacturing, and how Indian voters vote differently at the center and how vote differently in the states, and a lot of internal issues. Okay, and then there's a relationship between India and China in 24, and they've reviewed the top 10 events, some of uh, all these, how the six consensus, as per China, has evolved, and the border easing. These are the things which they're discussing, and we will be fools to think they don't discuss all this. Okay, they're discussing Modi's third term. They also discussed their own ambassador to India. These are points of discussion. Okay, and what about the Shinkulla tunnel? Many of us in India won't understand what Shinkulla tunnel is. That's the tunnel which connects the Manali axis with the Zojila axis, right? Through the Shinkulla or the Padam axis as it is called. We might not know it, but they're showing it with maps, right? Again, this naming of places, how they have named places in India and how we are also doing that. They have a perception. Okay. And then how military aspects related to India are discussed by the chiefs. All three chiefs are shown there. And issues about theaters and all that are getting discussed in detail. Okay. They also discussed the new tank which is coming up, or light tank. So, I mean, just give you the whole idea. Then the border dispute, how things are shaping up. These are the issues which are being discussed in great detail. Okay, and how the Tawang Tunnel or the Sela Tunnel has added to Tawang being part of India, and how it is sovereign to India. So all these issues and how we hold, functions in Tawang and in Arunachal Pradesh to declare or rather enforce our sovereignty, and what are the dangers of all these. All these are declared. All these are discussed in great detail, right? And they also discuss the Indian Ocean strategy. In this article, they've shown how we have established a new base in Minicoy and Lacadex. You remember this happened about 6 months back. Okay, and then about how Indian Navy is expanding and X, Y, Z. So if you see as a whole, there is a huge interest in India. But like I said in the beginning, we don't show it. Okay, that's the point which you have to understand. Okay, now I'll go into this article, which tells you how actually what is the major discourse going on in China about India. This is by Liu Zhonghui. Liu Zhonghui is he's the director and of the South Asia Research Center of the Shanghai Institute of International Studies. Now that's a major think tank. Okay. Now this heading it says, why is India still spreading fallacies when China is still slandering and provoking border conflicts everywhere? Basically, he's talking that India is spreading fallacies when China is trying for peace. And then in this article, he's gone into detail as to what China is doing to get India on board and peace, and what are India's way of looking at it, and how uh, China should thereafter look at India. It's a very thoughtful piece for us. We have to understand how China thinks about India. And I thought this was a very good piece to give us a view into the Chinese way of thinking. And that's why I'll go into a little more detail. And you have to see it in the light of what I discussed earlier. They are tracking us. They're tracking our border infrastructure. They're tracking Kumbh Mela. They're tracking almost everything. And there are enough people in India who write pro-China. Remember this. Unlike in China, where no one writes pro-India. I have not yet to come across anyone from China writing pro-India and being published. But in India, you will find a lot of guys writing pro-China. And it is quoted there. They have a set of Indian scholars who write about India for China in their media. And that's the kind of information they're spreading within their country to form opinions about India. And this is something which you need to understand. Okay, what is the broad view? The broad view this Liu Zhongyi expresses is both the countries have a long way to go before some kind of normalcy is achieved. It's not normal. Like we feel it's not normal, they also feel it's not normal. And China, whether it is the government or the Chinese funded enterprises, that is the private enterprises funded by China, cannot have high expectations in India. And this, to some extent, is, I won't say some extent, to a large extent, is manifest in the article which I showed you earlier. But I'll discuss this in the next episode. Okay, and I'll come back to it at the end. And then this author has, systematically highlighted the decline of the India and China relations. Right from beginning, he started from the time when, relations improved and went back, and India is seeking Chinese assistance and pressurizing China to put India as part of the nuclear supplies group. He's spoken of the Masood Azhar issue. Then he's spoken of our efforts to reduce the trade deficit between the two countries, and how, and which China has not budged. China could have done a lot to reduce the trade deficit by buying agricultural products and all that, but it has not. Just think, China is very clear that it will maintain its trade deficit. It might buy rice from any other country, but it will not buy from India. That's the kind of a mentality which China has. He's also spoken of the Doklam issue, where India has crossed the border. It's not China. And then how in 2019 we changed the status of J&K, and which impinged on their sovereignty. And this is a theme which keeps coming. And I find this is a very fundamental theme to why China has started behaving the way it has with India. I mean, you read anyone, they say, look, by doing what you did by article abrogating Article 370, India has changed the fundamental equation of oxidation by claiming sovereignty over that area. And it is their sovereignty at stake. And that has changed the Sino-Indian border equation. And that's why you say it's no more, the Chinese say it's no more a matter of a territorial dispute, but it's a dispute of sovereignty, overlapping sovereignty rather than overlapping claims. Okay, he's spoken of, he traces the increase of troops in Eastern Ladakh, large scale exercises which we carry out, and which he points to the fact that India has been carrying out exercises with USA, and so on and so forth. Now the Chinese as a whole are of the view that the border issue with India is become a big bargaining chip for India. And it's a big bargaining chip. Why? To increase the relationship, or rather closen the relationship between India and USA. And that India will always keep the border issue as the prerequisite. And they don't want to do it. Like I said, where they are, it's almost territorial in nature, plus the fact that we are occupying Arunachal Pradesh. That's their view. Okay. And they are very clear that we will not give up our intent to use the border as a bargaining chip. They are also very clear that we are going to strengthen the border and the infrastructure. And they feel that India is in a period of strategic opportunity because China is facing high winds. And China has gone into things like, what Xi Jinping says, rough weather, uncertain winds. So this thinking that India is trying to use this period when China is in problem to make good its claims, etc., is an issue which will keep coming up. Okay. Then, of course, recently Mr. Dole and Wang Yi, they met. They had the 23rd round of the special representatives meeting on the border. Now, China announced the 6-point agreement or 6-point consensus. India didn't bother about it. And that has actually rankled them. Now, why? Because China, when it gave out its readout, and referred back to the 2005 guidelines, which was mutually agreed in 2005. Okay. And there's a mention of some package settlement. They want that to be re-invoked. Right. And they are worried, or rather they are cutting with us because we have not spoken of it. And they claim this was mentioned when the two political representatives met, or the special representatives met. And they are worried that we've just termed it as a settlement framework. In fact, what we have done is exactly what the Chinese have done earlier. We repaid them in the same coin. But the fact is, this is their view, that India will not come to a settlement with China. So they have to adopt other means. Then there is this strong view in China that the decision making in India is confined to a small circle. Okay. And the small circle of diplomats and military people and politicians are the ones who make this. It is not a democratic process. That's what he says in the third sentence. For Sino-Indian relations, the strategic elites of India have formed a set of fixed statements and are still spreading their fallacies to the international community. And this small circle is the one which is, you know, giving out its opinion and shaping international opinion as per them. They forget that in their case, it's not even a circle, it's a point. It's Xi Jinping who takes the decision and no one else. And why they view that we have this ambition of using the strategic competition between China and US so that India rises. That's something which is there. And every time we deal with China, they will view us through this prism. That why is India doing this? How is India going to weaken China? How India will be on the side of US, and how India will make use of the opportunity represented by the gaps between US and India. This is the way they think. So it means they're never going to trust us. If they're not going to trust us, how do we trust them? In any case, we don't trust them. Because any agreement with the Chinese is not worth the paper which it is written on. Because historically, China has, what shall I say, has disregarded all treaties, including the one in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, it was a treaty that till 2050 it will be, one China, two principles, right? And Hong Kong will remain autonomous, but by 2019 they were separate. Okay, so that is the thing. So this is something which we have to understand, and this fallacy they'll spread, and all this they're spreading in Chinese, mind you. Remember this, they're spreading it internally, because not many people outside India read, outside China read Guancha. And these articles don't appear outside. These articles don't appear, because if they appear outside, you can at least refute it, you can argue everything, but here they don't. So what they write is for internal purposes, what they write externally is for different purposes. So what you write and respond to them is not for their internal purposes, your logic doesn't go in. And what they internally understand is based on those pro-China scholars, they're probably paying. And Chinese, not Chinese, communists in India. So you have to understand how they perceive in India and how we have to deal with them. Okay. It's ingrained in them that China is a major factor of convergence for India and US. Which is right. Why? Because China has become aggressive both with India and USA. We know that for the past 4 or 5 years. And they feel that India-US ties have played a vital role in advancing not only a sturdier bilateral framework, but also boosting emergence of security architecture in the region via minilaterals like Quad and IPEF. So whatever India is doing with USA is against China. All the structures with this thing, they know it. And they pronounce it, and they reinforce their ideas about India through such. Now they started saying, look, the Quad came up during Trump's first term, and it has gone to strength, and IPF has come with new supply chain, all that. And now when Trump comes back, there is a full scope of revitalizing this entire structure and to counter China. And hence, India will make use of this to make headway in technology. And technology being a core principle of China today, because that's where the main competition they feel is between China and USA and China and the rest of the world. They want technological dominance. So India is their danger. They don't talk of it. They fully well know that it's only four nations which have gone up in space: Russia, USA, China. And these three have done the docking experiment. And they're done, they have space stations and all that. India is now trying to do it. Of course, so far, the docking experiment, which we was to happen on 7th, changed to 9th, and at this point of time, it's aborted. But remember, technologically, something very important happened in this entire docking experiment, which people are not talking of. There were two satellites which came next to each other, guided to each other by 3 meters. They were just separated by 3 meters when some fault happened. And now they've been shifted 8 kilometers apart. ISRO satellite. What does it mean? You have co-orbital technology. You have the capability of going next to another satellite. And that worries them. That worries them immensely. Because you can send up a satellite and make it sit next to a Chinese satellite. You can't do docking, but you can do co-orbital. That's proven. Now that's a huge capability which they're worried about. And I read an article about this towards the end of 2024, last week of December, when this entire plan was being put into effect. Okay. Then there's this commentary about China-US ties and India. The first line is very interesting in this. The state of China-US ties will either propel or slow down India's march to regional prominence, economically and diplomatically. So, how China and US interact in the future will affect whether India will go up or come down. And as per them, and even as per what's coming out from USA, there are no indications that China-US ties will improve. In fact, today I saw a clip where there was a discussion between the outgoing NSA of Jake Sullivan of USA and the incoming, NSA of USA. What were they talking? They said, look, the main focus is China. And for that, we need India. Both, of course, there are other issues involved, but they're very clear that India is needed. So hence, as the India-US ties improve, the India-China ties will go down. And more, China will feel that India's prominence will go up. And as India's prominence goes up, we must expect trouble. And that's what they say. India's fortune as a bridge between the West and the Indo-Pacific will continue to gain traction. So what do they feel? India's attempts at building a bigger role for itself in the China-dominated non-Western forums, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS, will also help India to highlight its multipolar vision as well as its strategic autonomy goals. All this is why? Because India now poses an insider threat to them. After all, remember, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the BRICS were vehicles for China to set out a global order, their Sino-centric global order. And India is sitting next to it, and it won't allow. And India's relationship with USA is growing, which is apparent. So they have a problem. And the result, we will see more ties between Pakistan and China. And that's why I keep talking. We have to look at the Western Arabian Sea very seriously. The increasing maritime cooperation between China and Pakistan. Chinese are viewing it to this prism which I've just explained to you. So things are not going to be easy. And like I always say, there are two Pakistans. One is the rich Pakistan, or composing of the elites and the army, for whom money is not an issue, arming is not an issue. They're going ahead because they'll get it from China or whoever. And there's the other, the poor Pakistan, which will keep fighting and keep talking of. So we have to be very clear about this. I'll talk about this a little later because the Chinese themselves touch upon it. What about US India ties? He says Trump's America first will impact all emerging economies, including India. He's very clear, and he's got his own analysis. We'll talk of it. And his analysis is generally reflects the Chinese mood. Says in 2025, bilateral ties between India and US will be accelerated. And India will look for greater benefits through ISET, production of joint production of jet engines, and other important projects. Many in India have doubts about the jet engines and the ISET and technologies and all that. They don't have. And this is something which we have to understand. China doesn't have a doubt that eventually USA will help us in these. It might be a matter of time. And they also make a point which, look, the political people or the political brass in India are very happy that Trump is returning. And that Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump have good equation, right? And they will set aside all differences and go ahead having a anti-China stance. Right? All those issues like minority rights, democracy, backsliding, and all, which is part of the Biden administration, they feel will be a thing of the past once Trump comes in. Their assessment is quite right. That's our expectation also. And once that happens, our relationship will go to a different level. Okay. But at the same time, this man is highlighting what problems India can face with Trump. And he says Trump is an important reason why India is striving to improve relations with China in 2024. Or rather 2025. That's us. It's 2025. Okay. He says Indian media has been promoting that Prime Minister Modi has good relationship with Trump. Right? But they're still worried about it. Once Trump comes to power, and he's quoted 3 points. And why? He feels that Trump might not keep his promise. Or Trump is transactional in nature. So he might just have a complete revisit on Quad and things like that, or the IPEF. And Trump might renege on the earlier issue because they feel that there's a lot of difference between what Mr. Trump is now and what he was in the first term. And the second thing why they feel we are worried is Trump will increase tariffs on our products. And third, immigration problem. What is the immigration problem with India? That our H-1B visas will not be granted because Trump has different priorities. But all that, let me assure you, in my analysis, is unfounded. I mean, you just have to see what the incoming national security advisor and the outgoing national security advisor spoke together. And they're very clear. There's a bipartisan attitude on how to handle China and how to be more friendly with India. Despite everything, the competition with China is USA's first priority. As much as China has made USA its first priority to tackle in media, IAO, all that, the reverse is also true. And in fact, I would say there's a shift. And the shift is this. And the shift is this. Till COVID happened, USA was supporting China or supportive of China to a large extent. In fact, it was supportive of China to a great extent till Xi Jinping took over and a little after that. When Xi Jinping started turning inward, completely communist, USA started, you know, having neutral feelings about China. But COVID onwards, China in USA is very clear that either one of them can only be number one, USA or China. And USA is in no mood to give up against China. And now it has turned all its screws. So, to that extent, whatever this man says about how Trump will behave and all that, I don't think will come through. Right? We'll have to find a via media with Trump and the administration, which I'll speak of maybe in, on Friday when I do this thing with Mr. Shri again. Okay, this is very important, and now going to read out what they feel, and we'll go with explanation one by one. This is China's perspective of Indian behavior, right? The relations between China and India will be seriously affected by the American factor, right? This is what I've gleaned from all their writings. Now, all Indians regard the strategic competition between China and the USA as a strategic opportunity for India's rise, like I said earlier. They also feel that, India feels that USA will defeat China because in defeating China is India's victory. It doesn't matter who does it. But they feel no, that won't happen because if you look at how China is developing technologically, India will fail. Of course, this is a kind of a thinking which dominates Chinese thought process that technology alone matters. Technology is one part of competition between two nations or any set of nations. And I'll talk of technology a little later. I have to analyze technology and especially AI separately. But my view is technology alone doesn't dominate. And the fact that Xi Jinping has bet big on technology is something which I have repeatedly explained to all of you. Okay. So this is a bit of a overconfidence from China, but we have to live with it. The next point, the United States may seriously consider how to coexist peacefully with China and even establish a G2 mechanism. That is their hope. They want the world to be divided as a G2 mechanism, where it is USA and China at the top and the rest below. And that is what they're aiming at. I mean, let's be very clear. When you talk of Sinocentric world order, from what it is now, go to G2, establish a G2 mechanism, then kill USA and China at the top. And he says Indians are most worried about it. We must be. We must be worried and we must be aware of it. Something which I didn't know. Next year, India will host the Quad Summit. So 25, 26, we will be holding the Quad Summit, in which if 26, the Quad Summit is to be held, Mr. Trump will come here. So will the Prime Minister of Australia and Japan. He says at that point of time, India will take measure to strengthen the Quad as the main mechanism to contain China. So there's a lot of commentary which says, look, Quad has lost its relevant X, Y, Z. But not as per this. China still regards Quad as the main mechanism to contain itself or to contain it. In 2025, India will still take all possible measures to maintain its dominant position in South Asia and the IOR. They expect it. Of course, he's not mentioned what exactly India is going to do, but it's there. Okay. China's perspective of Indian neighborhood behavior, how we behave with our neighbors. Because this connects up to this. India will take all measures for a dominant position in South Asia and IOR. So, how does this go? The first thing is that look, India's policy is to ensure that China is kept out and have a pro India neighborhood. Okay. In their words, it is to curb pro China tendency of neighboring countries. India will curb pro China tendency of neighboring countries. And they feel that South Asian countries will try to maintain a balance between the major powers. It is at times like this they come out and acknowledge that India is a power. This is the word he's used. South Asian countries will try to maintain a balance between major powers. It comes out. Otherwise, India is not a major power. But the fact that they're doing such deep analysis indicates that they're worried. It indicates that the importance they give to India, much to what they portray that they don't, and much to what we feel are given to understand. Oh, China doesn't care. China cares. And China cares a hell of a lot. And China is worried also. Okay, then he talks of in 2024, Musu came to power, Disanaika came to power, Bangladesh things have changed, Nepal things have changed. And all these people, have leaning toward China. And they all have made a dent on India's South Asia policy. So that's important. We also know that. We also understand that, Pakistan is a problem for us. I keep talking of it. We talk of Bangladesh. We do so much analysis on Bangladesh and Nepal. But they feel that, India is going to have problems with Maldives and Sri Lanka. But the reality is different. The reality is slightly different. Right? Even now, just about last week, Wangi came back through Maldives. He went for some conference in Africa. On the way back, he went to Maldives, had a pit stop there and went and came out with some statements. They were all anodyne statements. And neutral people say that China is not able to match what India is doing to Maldives and even Sri Lanka. The hard realities is that Maldives and Sri Lanka have realized that they have no alternative to India. And China is definitely not an alternative to India. Okay. Sooner or later, Pakistan and Bangladesh will realize, but Bangladesh is a problem area. We'll talk of it as we'll keep talking of Bangladesh as we go along. And then he's highlighting, in his words, some countries launched the India withdrawal campaign in 2024. That is the India out. India out, converted to Chinese, converted back to English, reads Indian withdrawal. Okay. I mean, it is just a matter of semantics, but for all you know, they have instigated it. I wouldn't say for all you know, I'm very confident that they've been instigated, especially in Bangladesh. When people say the Bangladesh coup, China didn't have a hand, I don't agree with it. All the while, I think today, as things are coming out, the Bangladesh coup is a result of the equation between Pakistan and China. And USA came for the ride like fools. USA's whole story was like what it did in Afghanistan. They did something and later regretted it. In this case, they'll not regret it, they've just went off. So who's going to rule the roost there? Pakistan and China. And they're very seriously influencing Bangladesh, as we can see. And that's the difficult part which we have to handle in Bangladesh. We'll talk more of it differently. In fact, he's also very clear. He says, in particular, the fall of Hasina regime in Bangladesh was the biggest blow to India's South Asian policy. He's right, because it's not the fall of Hasina's regime which is a problem. It's the replacement regime. If Hasina had gone out through proper democratic means, no issue. Whoever came back democratically, we would have dealt with it. But now they've come back through a political coup. That political coup is dangerous because, as we know now, it's been 4 months. There's no sense of settlement in Bangladesh. But we'll talk of it. Next point he makes is Hasina's downfall has exposed the deep strategic contradiction between US and India. He's sensed it that India and USA were not on the same page to handle Bangladesh. And he also senses that this might change when Mr. Trump comes. And he's right. So they're keen. They're very keenly observing developments in this area. And he also says that in the Indian Ocean, India is exerting influence. And, uh, you know, they're forcing other countries to serve India's national interests. All actions of India are towards its own interests, and they're ensuring that Indian Ocean countries or in the Indian Ocean region, everyone is aligned towards IOR or towards India. And they're going to have a tough time here. They know that they're going to have a tough time with India in the Indian Ocean region. So those of us who feel, oh, China will walk over us and this and that, no. You see the tenor. The tenor is they're up against a tough competitor. The tenor is they're worried about India-US relations. The tenor is, look, India still has a hold on its neighbors, and the neighbors can't do without India. It's something which the Chinese realize. Less than the some of our neighbors who give in to rhetoric, the reality. And if you've seen Chinese behavior in the past 6 months, in all this turmoil which is happening in our neighborhood, except for Pakistan, China has not come forth with its solutions. So remember this. You're going to have problems, but China doesn't have the strength today because of its own internal problems to give solutions. And that is the missing factor in this discourse. They highlight India's problems in the neighborhood, but they're not giving Chinese solutions. And this internally also they're not giving. So that's a very significant issue. Okay. Right? Of course, India and South Asia, he's spent a lot of time for South Asian nations other than Pakistan. India affects their domestic political situation, which is a fact. And he says India promotes regime change. And how does it promote regime change? See this phraseology. To establish so-called economic interests by increasing investment in railways, highways, ports, and telecommunication in these countries. So we are doing all this to promote regime change. So what does China do with its Belt and Road initiatives? They use this same only thing, no? Infrastructure, trade, all that. And they do regime change. Isn't it true? But that's not the way they look at it. That's not the way it's portrayed internally. Internally, BRI is for the global good, then China is the great thing who's providing everything for everyone. And what others do is detrimental to those countries. So, in a way, this is also an acknowledgement that the Belt and Road initiative has not made headway in our region, except, of course, in Pakistan. In Pakistan, also, it's not made any headway. It's given them only grief. So those of us who think we can't match China and Belt and Road are mistaken. Over the past period of 4-5 years, China might have built some infrastructure in all these countries, which is largely useful to them, but they're left with the debt, so they have to go back to China. But India's deep connect with our neighbors has a different connotation. And now China has started realizing that. Okay. Then, of course, they'll criticize that India is inefficient in infrastructure construction and things like that. All those criticisms is there. And India does all this not to help those countries, but to prevent China coming there. And India also hopes to achieve its own rapid economic and social development on these. Okay. So he says, and India wants to develop on its own, but doesn't want to help neighboring countries. Only China can help. So these are the perspectives, and some of these perspectives, which these think tank, after all, Shanghai Institute of Strategic Studies or International Studies is a reputed organization. It's a reputed think tank. It's an international think tank. It's got a reputation of being one of China's foremost think tanks. And these are going out from guys. These are what the Chinese think. And Li Zhongyi is a reputed South Asian thinker. Okay. Pakistan India equation. Very, very interesting. He says India uses public opinion war, information war, cognitive war, and other means to smear Pakistan in the international community and disturb the people's hearts of Pakistan. How interesting that we are on an information campaign. And all the while, we know who does the information war and what ISI does and what ISI and China MSD do. MSS, that is Ministry of State Security. And then he says India supports unstable terrorist organizations in Pakistan or some terrorist organizations in Afghanistan in the form of proxy war. As per him, we are, promoting the proxy war in Afghanistan, or rather between Afghanistan and Pakistan, in a proxy manner. It's our proxy war which we are doing with them. So, see the duality of thought in China. When China helps Pakistan to promote proxy war in India, that's not proxy war. But we are doing proxy war to them. I hope we are doing. If we do, it's good because this proxy war is not against Pakistan only, it's against China also. And we need to do more. We need to do more gray zone activity because that's what China is going to do with us. And that's what I'm going to talk of in my next analysis. And India wants to destroy the construction of the China-Pakistan economic corridor and disrupt social order in Pakistan. So they're very clear. And I'm also of the same view. Why should we not? The China-Pakistan economic corridor, as per my way of thinking, has been the third front of Pakistan. The first front of Pakistan has been the Indian border. The second front of Pakistan has been the western border, Durand Line. And China-Pakistan economic corridor is the third front. Pakistan and China are investing a lot to protect this front. It is vulnerable. And this vulnerability is being exploited by BLA and by TTP and other organizations, whether it's in Gilgit-Baltistan or along hydropower projects or Gwadar and all that. It is a vulnerability they have created on their own by not taking people along. And we'll talk of TTP, BLA, China and Pakistan separately. Okay. The last one is very interesting. He says some Indian scholars have even proposed to learn from the practice of Israeli intelligence using pages to attack Hezbollah's leadership and adopt more high-tech assassination attempts to achieve their goals. For Bangladesh, India may take similar measures. How interesting. I wish we had this capability of using a pager kind of attack against, or in Pakistan. Okay. So, this is how they view us and this is how they feel. Is there, let me put the reverse. Is there a case for us to do something like this in Tibet? What they've been doing, what China has been doing in our neighborhood, should we do in Tibet? I think we need to really consider this. Why go up to Tibet? Let's do it in Yunnan, across Myanmar. very open. Okay. Then they talk of leadership, very interesting. He says China ties are broadly over dependent on top leadership. So the top leaders matter. So here he talks that it is dependent on top leadership. And earlier he spoken that the decision making in India is to a small circle. There's a contradiction in the way they talk. But in both ways, it is how to play down India. He feels that current leaders, that is Mr. Modi and Xi Jinping, are strong men with personality driven government policies and approaches. And as per this, bilateral contact between the two countries has limited value. It is only the top two leaders who matter. And he cites the example of the recent talk between, you know, India and China was achieved when Mr. Modi and Xi Jinping met at Kazan. So the Chinese thinking is that you have to operate at the top. So a lot will depend on Mr. Modi and how Xi Jinping behave or how they think. And we know that Mr. Xi Jinping has very clear ideas of a Sino-centric world order. China first, India last. And is it acceptable to us? No. We have to live with this thinking and behave accordingly. And last but not the least, you know, he says one thing seems very clear, right? The potential for a destabilizing China India military standoff so soon seems unlikely. So that means China is not prepared militarily to get back. They're not prepared to do what they did in 2020 in a hurry. So the dynamics changes, the scene changes from the LAC. Very clearly, this entire article, when you read and you what others, if you read this in conjunction, what's happening. Uh, Otherwise, which I showed you so many articles, the shift is towards trade, the shift is towards our neighborhood, the shift is towards Indian Ocean region. And of course, there's a caveat that Modi's dynamics, or rather lack of thereof, continue to favor the existing status quo. He says the dynamics between Modi and Xi Jinping are not great, so the status quo will continue. So in essence, we are not interested. The Chinese are not interested in getting back militarily at us immediately. They don't expect it to happen, and they're in no position to do it also. These articles tell you this. Why are they not in a position? Because if you read the other articles, they know they're in problems with Japan, Korea, and Philippines. Japan, Taiwan, Korea, Philippines. Those three fronts are open. Here they don't want to get back. They don't see a change in the status quo. If the Modi dynamics don't change, and I don't see a change in that. So they will get back to us how? They'll get back to us through trade. They'll get back to us in Indian Ocean and our neighbors. These three things are their future lines of action. In this, the trade war has already started. It's already started. And my next discourse on China will be on China's trade war on India and how we have to counter it. You will say, why is it started? See what they're trying to do with the Apple factory in Chennai and India. We'll talk of it in detail as to how to get off it because that's a topic of its own in depth. Right. With this, I've finished for the day. I'll take on questions. We have time. There's no hurry. Right. Thanks a lot for viewing this podcast. Yeah, this fellow Rob Richard Watkinson, he says India would cease to exist if it tries any adventurism. Go and save your crippling poverty. Let me assure you, you will also cease to exist. Okay, be very clear about it. If you chaps had the capability, you wouldn't have gone back. You went back. Okay, you are on a back foot now. Yeah, China has no money to feed its poor population, yet finds money for spreading chaos across the world. I agree with you. Yeah, China remembers Sun Tzu's strategies, pros but not cons. Chanakya will crush Sun Tzu, sir. What is taught in our war colleges means West, Russian, Japanese war culture. What needed added? Yeah. Mm, yeah. China is Pakistan on steroids and backstabbing. I agree with you. What is your view of of the new portrait that has been replaced in the 1971 war, Surrender One? Has there been any response from China? Any link to China now agreeing to sell TikTok to Russia? Partha, my view is that this is a thing which has happened. Maybe I have not met the chief. If I once I meet the chief, I'll have a word with him, and I'll get back to you. Right? There's no response in China on this. As far as China agreeing to sell TikTok to USA, uh, that by 19th the court will rule, Supreme Court will rule. Whatever the Supreme Court says, they have to do. They have no choice. Okay. Yeah. Chinese, despite feeling they are the center of the universe, they know historically it was India who civilized them. So we don't fit in their Chinese-led global future outlook. I agree with you. Uh, Sir, as US is US naval power with theater command around world, Russia, USSR has land power with theater command on its land. What should we prefer of Bharatiya traditional security threat as hybrid? Yes, we have a hybrid threat. And we should be some kind of a hybrid power, which is got a balanced disposition between continental power and maritime power. That's the short answer. Will grooming case of USA should go to UNICEF? Oh, I will not talk of this. We'll talk of China only today. Uh, what will it take for China to come to the table and settle the border issue once and for all? So far, I understand they don't want to do it, and it's a good pressure point. Will it ever happen? I don't think it will ever happen. Not in the near future. The way things will happen is the day China and India start equalizing. My view is the moment the Indian economy goes past uh, say about 6-7 trillion, and the Chinese economy, which is bottomed out, starts sliding down, and the population starts declining, then they will start coming to terms with India, and that will happen around 2030. Watch it. It's only for 6 years away. It will happen. Till then, we will have this to and fro gray zone, trade, Indian Ocean, that kind of a scenario. We'll talk of it. But this is also the critical period where our relationship will be unstable, right? And this is something which we have to be very clear of. Okay. Uh, no huge advantage in building your own LLMs, TCS. We'll talk of this later. We'll talk of LLMs when I talk of AI. Okay. I think we've answered all questions. Thanks for listening. This was at an odd time because I have an evening commitment. Otherwise, I would have spoken in the evening. So till tomorrow, when we'll talk of Pakistan. Mm. Yeah, will China finally demarcate territory along Ladakh if Pakistan balkanizes? Let us see. If Pakistan balkanizes, the first thing we need to do is take over Gilgit-Baltistan. The moment you take over Gilgit-Baltistan and POK, which is our territory anyway, right? Then China will start behaving differently. Then the whole situation in this area will change, and China has no choice but to change its stance at that point of. Yeah, our trade deficit is very high. Lata, exactly the point. This is part of my next discourse on China, right? And how China has started a trade war with India, and we should be clear about it. Next discourse. maybe on Saturday, maybe on Sunday, or maybe on Monday. Till then, have a great day. Uh, have a great day, and we'll meet tomorrow evening, where we'll talk of Pakistan with Tahir Gora. Till then, uh, good afternoon and Jai Hind to all of you.